Hello, everyone. Good morning and happy Friday. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we have Tom Shiro with us. He's a senior consultant here at Improving. He will be leading the discussion. And before I hand the mic over, I wanted to let you, our viewers, know about the Q&A feature located on the bottom of your screen. If at any point you have any questions, you can post it here, and Tom will be happy to answer them for you. And without any further delay, Tom, take it away.
All right, thank you, Jordan. Appreciate that. I'll go ahead and share my screen. And can you let me know, Jordan, if you see it?
Yep, your screen is live.
All right, perfect. All right, today we're going to talk about dbtvault, and we're going to talk specifically about building a data vault using a combination of dbt and Snowflake, in addition to obviously dbtvault. In order to understand some of the core concepts, we're going to go through what dbt is for those that aren't familiar with it. And we're going to understand the core concepts and the benefits of using dbt, which is a tool. In addition, we're going to dive into Data Vault 2.0 modeling. So this is a modeling technique. We want to understand what problems it solves and its basic table structures and why you would use Data Vault 2.0. And when we get into the main discussion of dbtvault, it is a combination of dbt, the technology, plus Data Vault 2.0 modeling. And it's a way to streamline your development process in order to build out a warehouse very quickly. At the end, I will go through some best practices and lessons learned. And some of that will involve project structure, a team that is needed to implement this. And I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised at some of the team members that can partake in something as technical as this. So who am I? Senior consultant. Jordan kind of introduced me, so I won't go into too much of that, but I've been working with data pipelines, team building, and data modeling for many years. So what is dbt? Basically, it's a transformation workflow that was created by Fishtown Analytics. So there is a CLI version, and there's also a cloud version. And with that, you can develop pipelines very quickly using native SQL. And you can also build pipelines using templates. And one thing that I really like about dbt is it starts to bridge the gap between software engineering principles and data engineering principles. For instance, you can build continuous integration and development pipelines. You can version your code, and you can build a lot of reusable code and components that can be basically reused, and they're very efficient. So if we look at a modern data architecture, we're looking at dbt itself. dbt is responsible for the transformation portion of your pipeline. So you're having data coming in from data loaders, and that might be Kafka, that might be Snowpipe, it might be another mechanism. But once data lands into an environment such as Snowflake, it's now considered raw data. It's ready to be massaged and transformed. That's where dbt comes into play. So it's responsible for data cleansing, renaming columns, determining data types, duplicating data, restructuring your models. So this is very important, because when we think about a modeling technique, in the future, we're going to be talking about Data Vault 2.0. That is a modeling technique that dbt allows you to create and build upon. One thing that I love about dbt is your built-in testing of data. A lot of times when we load data in a data warehouse, we end up with simply data that doesn't make sense. The primary key doesn't exist. A constraint or a foreign key constraint doesn't exist. And you can build in tests within DBT that are very simple, and they're right out of the box to help you ensure that your data is cleansed correctly. Again, you can version your code. Benefits to expect with DBT. So I will be going into more of the technical part of DBT, and I will show the project structure in VS Code at a later point. But one thing that is fantastic about DBT is it's easy to use for non-engineers. So in a typical data group, you might have someone that's highly technical, you might have someone that understands the business, and then you might have someone that's really good at SQL. Each of those people have a place with DBT because they can fit in and create a project within DBT. Another aspect I love about DBT is it's very easy to create and backfill data very easily. And I'll show that during our demo, how easy that is. There's built-in testing for data quality. There's an online searchable data catalog and data lineage, which is fantastic. So as you build your project, you get documentation built in to show how a query went from a raw environment all the way to being in a production view, for instance. And then in addition, there's reusable macros and template-driven development, which completely talks to dbtvault. So what is Data Vault 2.0? And I'll probably just call it Data Vault going forward to make it easier. It is an innovative data modeling methodology. So for those that know modeling, you know that there's the third normal form, and that's more in line with your applications. And then there's dimensional modeling. So dimensional modeling is based on reporting. Where Data Vault sits in is it is your persisted staging. So before your data is ready to be viewable on a report or in a dashboard, you want a way to track all your inserts, updates, and deletes, for instance. You want to be able to track that, and you want an easy mechanism that allows anyone to understand these structures and quickly build out a Data Vault model. And there's table structures such as hubs, links, and satellites that we will talk about in a little bit. Data Vault 2.0 is very flexible. It's very easy to understand. I'll go through on the next slide an example model. And the skill needed to create a model is a little bit less than, for instance, a dimensional model. But it's still important. It also enables you to be flexible and agile approach to development. So as you build out your different table structures, if you decide a table structure is no longer needed, you can simply create another one, or you can enhance one that already exists very easily. It allows you to create data warehouses and data marks quickly, and incremental delivery. So no longer do you have to worry about, I have my sales order information first before I have my customer information. You can actually start developing a Data Vault 2.0 model with any data set at any starting point. So let's take a look at an example Data Vault 2.0 structure. So the basic structures are your hub, your link, and your satellite. Within a hub, it's very simple to just understand this is your business keys. So your business key, for instance, in the hub customer is your customer key. That really is your customer number. It's a business key. However, the customer PK, that's a hash. It's based on your customer key. So it's a hash that automatically gets created when this table gets generated. So this allows you to say, for a customer, I'm only one customer, and that's all I really need to know at that point. Within a hub, you may decide to say that that customer number also comes from a particular source. You may say this customer is from, our domestic sales, or this customer is from our international sales. However, it's still customer information. So if you can think about a team that has to build out hubs, and they're tasked with doing that, It's very easy to understand. I just want to know what the keys are for our domain and our data models. That's all I really want to know. You can also look at it from the standpoint of your hub orders. Your order key, again, is just your order number. That's very simple to understand. And it's a very basic concept, but here's where the power comes in from that. You can start to build link tables. In the middle of this diagram, there is your link information. Again, your link information is your natural keys, your customer PK. I'm sorry, the hash based on the order customer PK is based on your natural keys. However, within the table, you want to store your primary keys. So that's a little more detail than maybe somebody wants to get involved with, but just know that this link directly corresponds to what the relationship between your customer and your order is. This way, you know that your hubs can be joined at a certain point, your customer to your order. And from your order, you would obviously have an order details or your inventory. And you could see how if you start with building out your customer, and then you move into your order, and then you move into order details, and you keep expanding this to the right, all of a sudden these hubs start to go into your inventory. And then within inventory, what were your receipts? What were your shipments? And you can just continuously build out those keys. And you can link all those tables, which is fantastic. So your satellites are mainly your attributes related to that domain, to that hub. So you can see here your sat order customer details. This information really shows that your satellite is telling you what your customer name is, their address, and where the record source came from. Now, in Data Vault 2.0, it is insert only. So it's very important to know that this model is very efficient in that once you have a record and it's a unique row, you never insert that information again, and you never update that information again, which makes this data modeling practice very efficient for building and continuously adding to this model and information that you need. In addition, the load date timestamp actually corresponds to the latest record. So if, for instance, you just want to know your sales order information on that came in last, you can pick out that particular record, and the satellites automatically keep history of all your data points. In addition, it naturally basically becomes a type 2 dimension, because you will keep, for instance, if you build a satellite based on your customer name and how it changed over time, it will keep what your name was, and it will keep all those records. And the latest record would be what is unique to that customer. So dbtvault is a combination of the technology inside of DBT along with the data vault modeling techniques. So you can see that, all right, so now we have an analyst. We might have someone that's very technical and can do Python scripting or something like that. And then somebody that understands modeling, somebody that understands the business. Within that construct, everyone has a place on this team, because DBT is SQL first and Data Vault 2.0 is a very simple modeling technique to learn very quickly. So DBT Vault, it is free, it is open source. It was designed by a company, I believe it's Data Vault out of the UK. And it's a package that runs inside of DBT. So you actually set this up just like you would any other project, and it's an additional library, for instance. In DBT, they call them packages. DBT Vault uses metadata to generate SQL. So this goes back to that template-driven development that I was talking about. So if conceptually you can understand what you want the model to look like, and you understand how to write and almost fill out a form in YAML, you can generate the SQL in the back end that will load your data warehouse. So looking at dbt vault. All right, so it enables Data Vault 2.0 modeling in your pipelines. So you have dbt, and we're back to that same view where we saw the raw data comes in. It needs to be transformed and ready for the business. Okay, at that point, you can see that that's where dbt vault comes into play. There are three main steps that you want to go through when creating a Data Vault 2.0 model using dbt vault. The first is creating your raw stage. Your raw stage is simply just making that data available for this model. So it might be a view, it might be a table, it might be the process after data comes into Snowflake, for instance, and you flatten that data out. That might be your raw stage. It's really just saying, here is the data I'm going to work with. The next step is creating your stage. Your stage is a view. And this is really where everything gets filled out as far as your template-driven modular code. You basically fill out in one view per table all your constructs. You will fill out if you want a hub. You will fill out how many hubs you want. You want to fill out your stage, your satellites and your links. This can all be done in one file. It is a .sql file. However, it sets YAML parameters, and you basically create this view, and this view in turn will build your raw vault, which is your hubs, your satellites, and your links. So if you can think about this from a 10,000 foot view is, I have raw data. I'm going to create a view, creating a template, and that template is going to generate SQL in the back end that will ultimately build out my hubs, my satellites, and links. And by the way, while we're just going over your hub, satellites, and links, there's also a lot of other types of Data Vault 2.0 objects, such as bridge tables and transaction links, and let me think here, multi-active satellites. So those are very important as well, but we're keeping it a little bit simple, and I hope to dive into Data Vault 2.0 a little bit more in depth in another discussion. But feel free to ask questions if you have them related to anything we're talking about. So we're off to the demo, the fun part. All right. So in VS Code, this is what your dbt vault, dbt model looks like. Within this model, you can see that I have a raw stage, a raw vault, and a stage folder. So within dbt, if your project file follows a folder structure. So if we look in the dbt project YAML file, you will see that I basically created the project structure that is exactly like our folder structure in the project. So that's a very simple thing to do. The project file matches the project folders. Within this project file in dbt, you can set tags that allow you to determine how you're going to process the data within those models. In addition, you can create materializations. In dbt, it comes with a materialization of either view, table, or incremental. So, I'm sorry, view, table, incremental. Yes, that's correct. So a view simply says for these models, we're going to create a view. A table means you're always going to recreate the table every time that part of the project runs. And an incremental obviously says that we're going to incrementally push data into our models. So that's a little bit of an overview of dbt and how we're going to process the data. Within the raw stage, you'll see that there's two folders here. We're going to go into the sales demo, and that's what we're going to be running today. The flight demo is something that I'm hoping to have in the future that has a few more bells and whistles that somebody can come into this project and learn all the aspects and all the different types of Data Vault 2.0 objects you can create. Within the sales demo and the raw stage, if we remember, raw stage is really just making the data available for your project. This table really already exists, but I'm just setting it up to mimic as if data was brought in through a data loader. And simply what this is going to do at this point is it's going to create a view for your raw stage. So we'll go ahead and run that. And raw stage sales demo. So this is a basic command, dbt run, select a tag, and anywhere that raw stage sales demo exists, it's going to run. So I'm going to really quickly, I'm one of those people that wants to demonstrate that there's no smoke and mirrors kind of thing. So I want to show you that in our demo folder, there's only an airline, airport, and flight table. There's not much information. So if I go back to VS Code and I run the raw stage sales demo, so this will probably take about 30 seconds to run. So not that bad at all. Okay. So going to your demo, you can see that I created a view. And that view simply is, come on. There we go. So that view, there's nothing too much magic has happened yet. Again, I'm just making the data available for our DBT Vault project. And this table is, it's just a view. If we look in here, we can see the syntax for creating that view. Pretty simple. Okay. Going back to VS Code, the next thing we want to do is we now have our raw stage. The next step is creating our stage. Now, some of these names can be a little bit confusing, but in stage, things happen much differently. So let's take a look at the vstage customer info.sql. In addition, it's important to know that the name of the file in DBT is actually the object that will be created. There are some ways to alias the table name, but we haven't really done that. We're just going with the default project. If we look in vstage customer, so this corresponds to our source model, raw customer info. So I'm now referencing a table in our raw stage. From here, you have various sections that you can fill out. So if you understand the business sense of you want your customer key to be named a certain way, you can use the section derived columns in order to rename those columns. So you will see that customer C_customer SK is actually going to be renamed to customer key. In your hash columns, this is where you start to define your hubs, your satellites, and your links. And from here, you can see that your customer PK is based on the natural key customer key. Your address PK is based on the natural key, your address key. So it's really just filling out a form and saying, I want more than likely a customer hub. I want an address hub, and then a link table that will link your customer to your address. And that is based again on, we can see here that it's actually based on the natural key between the customer and the address key. At a later point, we will see in the link, when we build out that particular table, we will see that it's defined a little bit differently than the natural keys. And we'll go through that. Your customer address hash diff. This is your hash. This is basically saying, I'm going to create a satellite based on the customer and the address. And I'm going to hash each row based on the natural keys of your customer and your address, along with your address information, your street number, your street type, suite number, city. So in essence, you're modeling right now. You're building out what you want your hubs, your satellites, and your links to look like. In addition, this, if you want to do a transactional link or a bridge table or a multi-active satellite, you would use this same view. You might add a few parameters, but you'd use the same view. So, all right. This is fantastic. And I want to show like how easy this is to fill out. If we were thinking of a team, it probably wouldn't take somebody too long to fill out this structure. It's probably something that they could fill out fairly quickly. And once you build it, you can verify if it builds exactly what you want. So let's try to look at running our stage at this point. Stage sales demo. Okay, so again, we're just creating a view at this point, and it's a view that is going to go against our raw stage. But I'm going to go into a little bit more detail with these views. So you can see here, the name is vStage customer info. Let's take a look at the SQL behind the scenes. So from this standpoint, you can see that it's create or replace view, has your column names, and it breaks into many different CTEs. There's a staging CTE. There's a source data. So you can see the different sections, your source data based on your raw customer info, your derived columns. Again, that's your renaming columns. So you can imagine like how hard it would be to generate this SQL by hand and how error prone it would be. And this again is going to build out our hub satellites and links for a 2.0 model. You have your hashed columns. It just keeps going on and on. Now look at the MD5 binary, changing your hash so that it is MD5. That is configurable. You can change your hash to be a SHA-2 if you want. MD5 comes out of the box. And you can also change that structure if you would like, based on your data. So it is configurable. And then you have your derived columns. So based on all that, let's take a look at what that data looks like behind the scenes, what that actually forms as a table. And it will take a little time to run, but you can see here that you build out, you have a list of all your columns, and you're able to follow those. Come on. Anyway, it's not cooperating. So you have a list of all your columns, plus when you get to the end, you start to show your hash diffs and your keys and the different information that you would have related to basically your data vault model that is going to be created in a second. So it has your load date, effective from, your customer address, hash, your link customer, hash key, your address, PK, hash key. It has all this information, which is really fantastic because this is your starting point. Once you have this information, you just really need to plug that into whatever object you're going to create. And you can alter this many different times. So you can continuously add columns to this view if you would like. We'll go back to our VS Code and we'll go into our raw vault. Our raw vault is where we're going to build our hubs, our links, and our satellites. So let's take a look at this creation of a hub. Now, one thing that's very important to know is we have all this information. Really, this is a template that we can fill out again. We're basically saying our source model is vStage customer info. That's pretty simple. We know that name. We know what the primary key is because we've already set it. We know what the natural key is and our load date timestamp is. We know all that information. So we can fill this out very quickly to create this hub. In addition, it's very easy to create hubs every couple of minutes, for instance, if you've already defined them in your stage. So let's go ahead. Let's look at another one real quick, just to show here. We also have our hub here. Again, you can have two source models. So you can have your V stage orders and your V stage inventory. So in those views, in those stages, you've created basically your hub hash key called nation PK in both those views. All right, so we're going to go ahead and create those hubs. And while that's running, I'm going to go over to Snowflake and I'm going to go into our history real quick because I want to be able to show what is running at this time. So you can see a lot is running. So you can see that create or replace transient table, hub line item, for instance. Look at the amount of code that we would have to write by hand in order to create this portion of the model, just the hub. And keep in mind, we will always reuse this same information to generate our hub line item or hub customer or whatever it is. So once this code is done, it's done. And you can see that the source, again, is your view. We'll go into our worksheets and we'll take a look at those hubs. In your hub for a hub customer, we'll take a look at that. You can see it's very simple. It is just your customer key, your natural key, and there's a hash on that. Now, I would recommend if you have customers coming again from many different sources that you might want to, differentiate that customer key came from a particular division or something like that. In addition, you could just create a division hub and say that you have a hub customer and hub division and link those two together. And again, here's the load date timestamp of when it was loaded and the record source, which is basically the record source that you define in your raw stage. So that's creating all your hubs. And we can see how quickly we created based on basically 1, 2, 3, 4 views. So far, we've created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different hubs. So let's go ahead and create now our links. And again, our links is what joins our hubs together. So if we basically run our link for sales demo, we'll see how long this takes. This might take a little bit longer. And let's go ahead and look at what's happening behind the scenes as well. It's very fascinating to me how much code can be generated from these templates. So you can see that again, you're creating a transient table called link customer address. This is the code that was generated based on our view. Not bad at all. And we'll go here. And let's take a look at one of the links. Now, this isn't very appealing to your eye, for instance, because this link really is just describing a relationship between your customer and your nation, or your customer and your order. However, this becomes very important to understand the structure of your Data Vault 2.0 modeling, because again, Data Vault 2.0 is persistent staging. It's designed to keep track of all your inserts and all your unique values and your slowly changing dimensions and things of that nature. But it's not really designed for consuming data from Power BI, for instance. You still want to create afterwards a dimensional model. Okay, so I'm going to back up a little bit because I did skip a step. So I'm going to go into, while I'm running my satellites, we're going to look at that information for links and satellites. So in our sales demo again, you can see that this link that is created, this link again is nothing more than a template based on values we already have. So you could almost copy and paste this out and change your source model, change your PK, your foreign key, and your load date timestamp, change it to whatever you like, and you can build that link fairly quickly. And just a second, let me try to, I'll actually open it this way. We'll look at the satellites as well. When you look at your satellite, again, this is just information that you already have. So your source model, again, is your view. Your primary key is your link, or it can be a hub. Your source hash diff is already defined in that view, in that stage. Your payload is simply all the columns you want to be in your satellite, except for you don't want your keys in that reside in your hub or your link. You don't want those in your payload. Those are the columns that will be in your satellite. The source effective date, we're not using in this particular instance, but keep in mind you can say effective from if this happened to be a slowly changed dimension. And again, your load date and record source. So this is just filling out another form based on information we already have. And oops, and we'll go back here and let's take a look at those satellites. So let's take a look at the data in those satellites. For our satellite customer address, you can see that based on the link, we have a customer hash diff, and we have our street number, our street type. We have all the information for that particular row within our link. So if we were to look at this in the future sense, so if now we have all this and we're building out our structures very quickly, you can almost sense that a combination of your hub and satellite starts to look a lot like a dimension. If you, for instance, have customer name and maybe some other various customer information in one satellite, and then your customer address in another satellite, you can actually build two dimensions using the same hub. And that's where the power of Data Vault 2.0 and dbtvault come into play, in that if I start off with customer information and I at a later point want to add address information to that model, I simply create a view, a stage on that customer address information, and I just start to build out those components, those hub satellites and links. The other thing that I really like is the ability to run code at any point in time. So in dbt and dbtvault, basically this project is aware of all its other components. So it will have the ability to track what has been created first or second or third and what the precedents are. So if I were to do something, for instance, like we're just going to set off, I don't remember. Let me look up real quick what the tag is. I think it is stage sales demo. Nope, it's just sales demo. Okay. So we're going to kick everything off just to pretend that we want to reload everything. We just want to start over at the beginning, or we don't trust that data has been loaded correctly. Maybe we missed a few things. You can start to just run the sales demo and run this entire project based on tagging. And it automatically knows that it needs to build out your raw stage first, then your stage, which is again is your views, and then it's going to build out your hubs, and then your satellites, and then your links, because there's dependencies brought in that are automatically satisfied when you run the project. So you can imagine that if I'm running several pipelines throughout the day, and I accidentally get a little bit behind in some of my sales order information, I can simply run a reload of my sales order part of the project, and it will automatically sync up in Data Vault 2.0. It will automatically sync up all the records. And then from that standpoint, if the pipeline goes on into building out a dimensional model or a view for the business to get that data, you can see that that will be very possible using one tag, which is fantastic. So the last thing I'm going to do, actually, let me look at the time. We have enough time, so I might show some of the documentation that is generated automatically in DBT and dbtvault. So if we go to, I'm always astonished with how much code is generated. If you can imagine when you load a table and you're reloading, say a table exists and there's 1 million records. Typically what has to happen in, for instance, a store procedure is I'm creating a temp table, or I'm preloading part of the data, and then at a later point, I'm updating the data. What typically happens is DBT will automatically create a temporary table for you to load your data into. Again, it's based on your views, and it's creating a temporary table. That temporary table will have all the information, is comparing the data that exists in the current table to the data that's coming in from your source table. And what's important about that is, since it's insert only, we want to make sure that there are actually records to insert, otherwise don't do any work. And this code is built for you automatically using that template driven modeling, basically. And you can see how much code. Let's try to look at what was done over the past, couple of minutes. You can see that there's various commands describing a table, understanding what columns are in there, creating temporary tables, again, inserting the data based on our temporary table and that definition of the temporary table. And that table will the temporary table will be automatically dropped when this is completed, which is fantastic. And you can see that once again, we've created, based on 4 views, there must be maybe 30 different objects here. We have, I think it was 6 or 7 hubs, 3 links. Well, actually more than that, more like 8 links and another 10 satellites. So in 4 views, we've created approximately 30 different objects, and the relationship to those objects are built in. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little bit of documentation. And this is not necessarily related to dbtvault, but it is something that is very important to know as far as what can be done with DBT and dbtvault. So I'm going to generate the documentation first. In the background, it's running all sorts of code. Again, this project knows its dependencies. It's done by, for instance, in your stage view, when you say, this is my raw stage view, it understands there's a link in between those 2 objects. And when you build out and generate the documentation for this project, you will be able to see additional information for your project, and you can serve this page up to your business so they understand, what has been developed and how the project works. There's not going to be too much in here, but I just want to go into some of our sources for demo. You can see that our sources for your customer, you can see that here are your columns for the customer. Here are the type of data, data types in there. What it's referenced by is referenced by our raw customer info. your sample script here, which is fantastic. All this is really important information, so you know how the project relates to each other. If we go into, let's go into our database real quick and go into customer. Let's go into something else. Let's go into a data factory demo, and let's go into our hub customer real quick. So from here, again, you have the details of the different tags up at the top left here that you can process your DBT Vault with. And you have the owner, account admin, probably it'd be, sysadmin or some developer at that point. The relation is data depository, demo, hub customer. You have a lot of information, your approximate size of your table. You have the columns within that table and what is referenced by. You can see here there are tests. Again, there's built-in tests that you have to configure, but they're built in as far as you don't have to design the test. You just have to name them and configure what you want to be tested. And you can see the dependencies based on models. You can also see the dependencies based on macros. So we can look at a macro in the background and we can see what that looks like. So if we go into the macro of the hub, we can see all the different models that are based on that macro. And we can start to see what our macro actually looks like. So that's fantastic documentation that is very beneficial to helping everyone in the business and the developers understand your project. And so I think we actually have a couple more minutes. So I haven't had any questions, I don't believe. So I'm going to go into one more thing that is very beneficial. So while all this is configurable, when it comes to your project, I guess the way you design your team, you really do need someone that understands, or at least can be brought along to understand some software engineering and data engineering principles. So you still need to know that as far as overall your DBT project. In order to get started with DBT Vault and DBT, in essence, you do not need that. And that's because if DBT is SQL first and you can understand how to fill out various forms, you can build a team and get started very quickly and involve those from the business and your development team so everyone understands what you're building. And I think more than anything, I was very surprised with how easy it was to get started with DBT. And it's also very easy to get started, simplify your development process, and expand on it into CI/CD pipelines and expand on it into custom code that you want to execute. But yeah, in a nutshell, that is DBT Vault, and it's a wonderful technology, and I've really enjoyed using it. So
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I do encourage our viewers, if you have any questions, this is a great opportunity to post them. I'll give you just maybe a few more seconds to get them out there. In the meantime, Tom, thank you so much. This was really a great talk. We're always happy to have you on here. And to everyone on our call, thank you for joining us today. The recording of the session will be available on the next business day, that's Monday, from our virtual events page. I'll post that in the chat right now. You can find this as well as all of our other previous Friday Lunch and Learns. And please keep an eye out for our next virtual Lunch and Learn. We have one every Friday from noon to 1 p.m. Central Time. We look forward to having you join us next time. Do you have any other closing comments you would like to make, Tom?
no, I think I'm curious out there how many people have used DBT? And I know that's hard to take a poll right now, but I'm kind of curious who my audience is. If we get a lot of people that don't know what DBT is, because I thought about expanding this into a series where we go over the basics of DBT and then deep dive into DBT and then give a discussion on Data Vault, if that's appealing, and then go into deeper discussions on DBT Vault, because this is one of the more extraordinary things I've seen. It really is beneficial. It works. And I've seen teams that have various degrees of skill sets. I've seen them be effective. And that's kind of unheard of. It really is. It's very hard to experience that. So I've really enjoyed working with this technology.
Personally, I haven't used it before, but it looks very helpful, very interesting, very powerful tool. I'm not sure if you're able to see the chat, but we do have a couple people posting.
Yes, I see the chat.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that Don uses it, which is fantastic. And he loves it, especially because of the testing capability within DBT. So that's an entire topic all on itself. That would be great to go into at another time. So, yeah.
All right.
Anything else from me?
Yeah, well, thank you again, Tom, and everyone else on the call. Thank you for joining us. We really love having you on here. And keep an eye out for our next Lunch and Learn. Otherwise, have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jordan. Bye.
Thank you.